So I'm just going to go over the key here with you. If you're wanting to get the marks for doing this by hand, you get a mark for figuring out your mean. So all I'm asking you to do is find the sum divided by the number of values. So you get a mark for the 138.14. Okay? And then the next part is going to be a little harder to mark, but this is the formula for standard deviation. So I focus on the top part here. I would expect to see you setting it up like this to a certain degree, where you show me that you're taking every single value and subtracting the mean from every single of those data points, right? So you take the 125 minus the mean, square it. You take the next value, 143 minus the mean, square it. And this was on Monday's lesson, okay, if you want to look it up. And I even give you a study sheet entry for this. So you get a mark for this step. If you show that, you get a mark, okay? Then the next part is this part, okay, where you actually show me what the difference square would be. And I would like you to use all decimals, okay? Whether or not you write them down here, I don't really care. Like if you just want to go 172.6 dot dot dot, I'm assuming you're using all decimals, right? But so I show what every single one of these brackets ends up being and the sum. So what is it when I add it all up? That gets you another mark. Now, if you're looking right now and you can find the one mistake you made, if you can see, oh, I just mixed up the 9 and the 6 or something, take off half a mark only. We're not going to make a big deal as long as all of this is visible there, okay? But there's a mark for the first step, there's a mark for the second step, and then the last mark is for taking that sum, putting it there, dividing it by the number of values, and then square rooting it in that order. You just stopped here. Minus half today, because you're like, if you divide, that's still kind of part of the final, yeah. So yeah, square rooting is important. And let's see, like, let's go through some scenarios that you might have encountered. Let's say you got your mean wrong. You got this number wrong, it's a different number. You don't have 138.14. Lose the mark here, right? You lose this mark, and then we're going to honor everything that follows thereafter. We're going to say, well, we made a mistake here. So let's say you got 128.14. I should see 128.14 every single time, right? And then obviously, if I were to mark yours, I would check if whatever you put in is actually true after that. So don't lose all marks if you got your mean wrong, okay? So this portion, in total, if you think about it, 4 marks associated with question 1. Okay, so put a mark out of 4 next to this part right here. Okay. Let's do the bonus right away. I would say the only way you're going to get the 2 bonus marks is if this must be there, okay? Or else you're not in the game, okay? So what needs to happen first when you have like an interval like this, you need to find the midpoints, and you do that by adding these 2 and dividing that answer by 2. So you're finding basically a point that is right in between these 2 extremes, these 2 ends, okay? So if you have that, I would give you a +1 today. And then for this part right here, I would give you a +1 as well. Okay? But if you didn't do midpoints, you're not getting anything, okay? I hate to tell you. Because it's a bonus, we get to be, set the rules here. And what needs to happen for you to get this right, for you to get this part right, you need to have L1, right? You need to put this into L1 and the frequency into L2. And then you get these values here, right? And you'll notice that n is equal to 35 if you do that. I think I still have this on my calculator, so I'll just show you how to, yeah, I still have the midpoints there, the frequency there. You go stat, calc, one variable stats, second 1, comma, second 2, okay? And that's how you get your answer. So +1 for that part. I would encourage you, you don't have to show a whole lot of work, right? So one variable stats and then show me that you've done this. That's kind of part of showing your work. Moving forward, if you didn't do that today, that's fine, okay? So this page is worth 4 marks, and potentially you could have scored 6 out of 4 if you did this right. Okay, next page. So we got rid of these, we only consider games 1 to 5. If you type this into L1, L2, right? So technically, I would suggest you kind of show a bit of a trail, and then you do one variable stats using L1. The mean should be, and please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not going to use pen because I know that I may have typed something in wrong. I had to redo the key, right? So it's 40.8, 3.12. Yes? Yes, enough nods, okay. And Patrice is 36.8, 1.47. Yes? Okay. And Morgan, 39.6, 4.76. Yeah, okay. 34, 0.89. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Very insecure today, very insecure, so I need my audience to give me a little bit of a feedback there. So 4 marks is basically just checking, do you know, are you pretty good at typing in numbers? Okay, that's what I'm checking today. All right, which player is most consistent? And obviously if you got any one of these wrong, you just go -1. Yeah. This one? You got 0.19? Oh, that's a rounding error, yeah. Rounding, just put an R there. Rated R. Which player is most consistent? Explain. For me, right, I would, obviously this would depend on whether or not you got this right, but Paige is the most consistent. Paige, since she has the lowest standard deviation. Yeah.
I didn't write like standard deviation as like SD.
Yeah, that's fine. SD or that symbol, right? This one. And if you want to nerd out on these ones, you go for it, right? A low standard deviation, I'll just use that one, indicates that the data is clustered around the mean. Okay, it means that most points are close to the average, right? Because remember, if you think about the calculation of standard deviation, it always takes into account how far are you from the mean, how far are you from the mean, how far are you from the mean, right? We're always asking that. And so if your standard deviation is low, that means that that distance is very small, right? Okay, so you get a mark for that. If you actually have, you don't need the addition that I put in there. You just need to say that it's, for me, it's Paige because of having the lowest standard deviation. That's what I need to see. If you just pick the name, we're not going to give you the mark on this one. Okay, you need to say why. If you were the coach, which player would you substitute into the game and why? Because I trimmed the data set, it's a little harder to determine this. I'm going to be honest. So I will basically give you the mark if you just justified it properly. So I, for example, I can see some of you saying I would pick Patrice because although she doesn't have the lowest standard deviation, right, her average is higher than Paige, right? So Paige obviously is the most consistent, but has a very low average. That's why I would not pick Paige personally as a coach. I would go a little bit higher average and maybe compromise a little bit on the standard deviation, right? If you said Paige and you justify, I would, even though Paige's average is the lowest, she's the most consistent player, I would still pick Paige. That is fine. You just have to justify. So if, let's say I choose Patrice, right? Why? Has a higher mean compared to Paige. Oops. Has a higher mean compared to Paige. And a slightly higher standard deviation. I would compromise on consistency in order to get a higher average, right? So that's something to consider. So you kind of have to think, even testing, right? Maybe you're not as consistent, but your average is still higher. Maybe you're still like, hey, I may have not been as consistent, but I would rather have a higher average, okay? That's one thing you can say. So I will basically give you the mark. You decide. You're the teacher. If you feel like, you know what, I think I got this. If you picked, let's say you picked Anna. You pick Anna, you say, well, Anna has the highest average, but doesn't have the worst consistency. Because who has the worst consistency out of all four? Morgan has, right? So you could say, I pick Anna because she has the highest average, but doesn't have the worst consistency, like a second worst in terms of consistency. So you can say that if you want. I know it's tough stuff. I know that. Hopefully by the time we're done the unit, you'll have a pretty good grasp. Okay, so you got a mark for that if you did a pretty good job explaining. How would a set of data with low standard deviation differ from a high standard deviation, right? So you can do something like this. Maybe you want to have a little bit of a compare and contrast, right? Low standard deviation, data clustered around mean, indicates consistency. You would probably, if you could, I would say that the bell curve would be steeper, like more, if this is your average, most of your data would be like stacked here, like we're talking like hundreds of data points sometimes, right? It'll be closer to the mean. And if you have a high standard deviation, data is spread out. Oops. That looks weird, but it says spread out, trust me. I just need the skills. Like the writing skills, I'm totally a doctor. But you would not trust me cutting anybody open, right? I don't think so. Data spread out indicates inconsistency. Data would be more, if this is your mean, the mean is kind of like trying to find the middle, it would be more like this. right? It wouldn't be as steep, it would be, and you have more outliers. Like there's usually outliers, there's data points on the extremes, and that kind of flattens the curve, okay? This is what we wanted during COVID. We wanted the cases to be spread out. We wanted outliers, okay? So I will give you 2 marks for this if you did a pretty good job at explaining what the difference is, okay? So you've got 2, 3, 4, and another 4. So the backside is actually worth 8 marks. 8 and 4, right? 8 and 4 is 12 total. You could have scored 14 out of 12, right? Potentially with the bonus. So, oh, it is out of 12. Perfect. Sometimes I get it right.